artist talk. My name is C. Meyer. I'm the exhibitions manager, and we are recording. So again, if you miss any of this, or you know anyone who couldn't make it, we'll have that up in hopefully by end of week. But yeah, welcome. We're happy to have you all here. I'm very excited to be hosting J Thompson tonight, and also to be hosting his show currently up that just opened last Thursday here at Blue Sky. Runs through October 2nd. What that is.
Hey, who's breaking the rules here?
We work in a very quirky building, so I don't know what that is. So just ignore that noise. I'm going to first start off by just reading you our land acknowledgement statement at Blue Sky. We at Blue Sky humbly acknowledge that our programming is being held on the traditional lands of the Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia, Wimal, and Willamette rivers. In this online format, you may be participating from other areas, and we invite you to consider your own land acknowledgement that reflects your location. We also acknowledge that the very technology we rely on for these online programs is inequitably distributed and not equally accessible, creating new virtual displacements and exclusions. We call attention to the need for action now and in the future to address these disparities. I'm very excited to be introducing J Thompson. Al settled in the immigrant community of Spring Valley, New York in 1996. His time spent in college studying graphic arts helped shape his core values in visual communication and community. Seeing the apparent decline in his old neighborhood eventually led him to his first monograph, Remnants of an Exodus, which we have here. Thompson has been involved with a number of group exhibits and commissioned for companies such as University, Under Armour, Moet Tennessee, NYC Go, Kaiser Health News, The New Yorker, New York Times Magazine, and New York Times. His work made several appearances in PDN, Boom, Lens Scratch, British Journal of Photography, The Guardian, National Geographic, Italian Vogue, NPR, BuzzFeed, Lens Culture, Rocket Science, Float Magazine, GUP, C41, among others. And we're very excited to also be hosting or having copies of Al's brand new monograph. The case-bound 104-page book with red PVC insert is comprised of 55 black and white photographs made over several years. The book includes an essay by Shane Rochelot, Gathering Remnants, and we have copies here at Blue Sky that are signed by Al in the front, and you can come and purchase those here if you're local, but you can also get a copy on nomicbook.com. And with no further ado, I will pass it over to Al. And also, we will be holding a Q&A at the end, so feel free to pop questions into the chat as we go through the presentation and after, and we'll do that. I'm gonna let Al take over with the share.
Thank you. Wow, what an introduction. Okay. I am going to put this sharing thing on. Welcome, everybody. And thank you very much, C and Molly, for having me, and the entire Blue Sky gallery. I also would like to thank you folks here, you wonderful folks, for showing the love and being here as well in support of this project. Okay, here we go. You guys see what I just put up there? All right, so this is a piece that I did. I grabbed this on, quickly grabbed that on Google, and it shows Spring Valley. And as you can see, there's a, surrounded by, a few other towns all being affected as well, slowly affected. Right here, if you zoom in, you can see a soccer field, a combination. It's a combination of a soccer field and a baseball field, a tennis court, and a basketball court as well. And there's a body of water right there. And just a block over is a house. I used to live there in 20, I said 20, in 1996. I had moved there and I was there for a while. So I was always passing by the park, and, you know, the park was just like right down the road from me. So I have like a huge connection with the park and with the town of Spring Valley in general. Before I start reading, I just want to scroll through a few things. My original project before Remnants of an Exodus, this is like a title that I came up with recently, but it's called like County Affairs, Separate Lives Lived. And it's basically to show the division in the county. The county right now has, a lot of different ethnic groups, Black, Asians, Latinos, secular Jews, and religious Jews. Irish, we have a huge Irish population there as well, and Italians too. So over the years before my Remnants project, I used to go around and photographing people and trying to find the connection here, and within the town is show that there are separate lives lived, but there's like some form of there's some similarities, like in cultures as well. So some of these images are were basically shot in the span of like maybe 3 years. My gateway to documentary photography actually was there's one day scrolling through the internet and I saw a photo project. It was from Matt Eich, not Ike. And his work really influenced me over the years. And so, like around 2000 and maybe 2006-ish, 2006, 2007, I saw that like a lot of my work would kind of resemble some of the things that he did. And, and we kind of know within photography and art how, you have like the people that you look up to, but some of that kind of rub off on you, subconsciously. Again, I gained a lot of connections over the years, and I was able to photograph just the different facets of community. This was photographed in Pearl River, but as simple as that image is, the image after that, because I'm all about sequencing as well, and playing along with like just storylines, and so I thought these two would work really well together. Kind of intense, yeah. Again, photographing different subjects, different people. This is a friend of mine, Carol. I met her many years ago. She's been going through a lot of things, like, her spinal issues, but she's an investigative journalist. And we used to go around the entire Rockland County. If I needed to know anything about whatever issue there is happening in Rockland County, she would know about it. She knew a lot. This was a town hall meeting. It got pretty rough. A few guys got up in my face as well while I was photographing the meeting. It was kind of nasty. One group of people versus the other, and the entire night got really testy. For me, I mean, it's not really hard hitting for me, but I just wanted to illustrate that, these were some of the things that were happening. So that is what I wanted to show you before moving on into the next phase. So this right here, I wrote this a couple weeks ago, and I kept on going back and re-editing, but it shows a brief history of how I grew up in the county in general. And I know some of you guys already heard that from me, but I wanted to get a little bit deeper in this, because it's something that I kind of need some closure. And I thought, what best way to do it than, maybe reading something to you guys that's pretty personal. And for me, growing up, I was never that. I was more of like an introvert, actually. Like, in terms of my personal life, I never really liked talking about my personal life. But I thought, moving into, after I finished with that project prior, or paused that project, I said, nah, that project is not going to work for me. And, over several years, I just decided to reevaluate, like, how I, the direction, because I just didn't want to give up the story. And hence we have remnants of an exodus. I was able to settle down and looking in the faces of others and studying their gestures and establishing like this emotional connection, between myself and them. So a brief history. Spring Valley sits just 40 minutes north of Manhattan, New York. A 2021 US Census claimed the population increased to over 33,000. It is one of the densest towns in the entire Hudson Valley. In my recent studies on the town's demographics, I noticed the decline of certain communities of color, mainly Caribbean immigrants and Americans of the African diaspora. Latinos remain the dominant group, but they too were negatively affected by the current landscape. The East Ramapo School District experienced a heavy loss of resources that were meant to better the lives of the young. Art and music programs were axed, while the acquisition of new equipment in the sports department almost became an afterthought. The school grounds required more than just small fixes. My curiosity sometimes led me around the old neighborhood. That Seventh-day Adventist church, where I occasionally attended on Saturdays, faced blocks upon blocks of new homes barreling down like a game of Tetris. The school board became more problematic since the introduction of Orthodox Jews in highly influential positions. In 2014, a New York Times article cited an investigation that concluded, and I quote, "The board had shown favoritism to the Orthodox Jewish students who attend private schools," close quote. It was increasingly difficult to get anything done. What we do know is that the public schools' resources got redirected into the private school sector, which overwhelmingly belonged to an ever-expanding Orthodox community. Voting as a bloc and as one religious group gave themselves reassurance that laws would continue to favor their own. The foundations of the town's zoning laws were dismantled. Large condos on land with very little space were the way they moved forward. Needless to say, the power shift had already begun many years before we knew it. Small pockets of residents formed a coalition with a few religious Jews who felt the need to fight for what they believed was not within the best interest of the town. They failed. Of course, I was angry and dumbfounded. Hardly anyone gave a shit, except for some lodging short bursts of complaints until they finally gave in and moved away. The obvious method of redlining was on full display. A small business would find it difficult to make its monthly rent as consumers fled. Property taxes had gone up, way up, leading property owners to increase their rents. It was a blatant example of passing down the burdens to renters. My long-term memory was too sharp to ignore these conditions. But what else could I do other than letting my feelings be heard to my next door neighbor? Or maybe I should just paint me a picket sign to show solidarity along with a few brave enough to stand up. My personal history. I'm one of many Caribbean immigrants who settled in Spring Valley in the mid-1990s. It was a town once known as Little Haiti, dominated by the exuberance of Haitian culture, and many more. Barbershops had long waiting lines, the smell of fireworks dotting themselves in the air on the 4th of July. Restaurants filled, dance clubs entertained on Fridays and Saturday nights. And a Haitian radio station shared the latest compa. The taxi cab with radios playing aloud as animated voices ballooned throughout the speakers in the back. "I'm gonna pick up another customer on the way, okay?" the old taxi man insisted in the thickest of Creoles. The stains on that cold leather seat had an old man smell to it. All I wanted to do that Friday night was go home and play Mario Kart with Tyrone and Jeffrey, or watch TV. My friend Chris was a video game head too. We all were. But as soon as he graduated high school, he enlisted in the Navy. Upon his yearly return over the Christmas holidays, our little Jamaican clique would walk the malls and hang around the park and pit one ego against the other. They even went to Stilettos every so often. Stilettos is a gentleman's club. It sits one town over. Possessing a fake ID was pretty common. Me? I kind of felt out of place, streaming my youthful frame through those shiny and colorful hallways. So I stayed away. In fact, I was never that crazy, adventurous type in my teen years. Well, not in this country anyway. I enjoyed walking Main Street to check out the latest underground hip hop mixtapes. My friend Claude had introduced me to the underground hip hop artists jockeying for rap supremacy. I blew all my money on music. I even remembered my first Walkman. I remembered my first CD player. And I remembered purchasing my first Busta Rhymes cassette at the Wiz. I fell in love so much that my friend and I started our own little rap group. We produced beats and freestyled anytime we had a chance, but mainly at schools and at nights. I remembered one of many rap names that I possessed, Alphinite. It meant to live forever. There I was, determined with a pen so savage that it shattered my old beliefs and repainted them with new dreams to escape a life that I was so convinced lacked love and compassion. Yes, I started writing street poems since the age of 16. I wanted the limelight of fame so I could gain a sense of empowerment and help deliver my family and those with daily struggles into a better life. Mom and I moved around town quite a few times in the attempt to settle. Looking back, I'm reminded how she missed the home buyer's boat. I remembered my high school economics teacher awarding us 11th graders tips on the best way to acquire wealth through home ownership and flipping houses every 10 years. He was a tall, bald, and skinny 68-year-old Caucasian man who wore earrings in class. I hated high school in this country, though. There was something about those kids that unsettled me. But I got good grades and made the dean's list every quarter. I also worked almost every day after school at a local restaurant, 6 days to be exact. I even found time to stay up all night just to complete my entire semester's homework, which they gave out in advance. I was still able to connect to the park. I passed by every single day going home. This is what I remembered in the most vivid sense imagined. The sport of soccer was huge among people from the Caribbean and Latin America. Different ethnic groups were still segregated, although we shared the same soccer fields. We literally thought every Spanish person around us were from Mexico. Nevertheless, there was respect between us. When J Thompson was mayor, he made sure to keep the floodlights on until we're done playing soccer at nights. The annoying question would occasionally pop up. Is the mayor your dad? I chuckled. No. After years of educational growth in the art field and ignoring the criminal patterns of the new mayor, George Darden, I determined the best way moving forward was to document all people involved. While I thought it was necessary to pursue my cause in the traditional sense of documentary storytelling, I discontinued the project. In my mind, the visuals weren't great and fell way short of my expectations. Perhaps it's the connections that I may have lacked between my subjects and me. Or I simply discovered having little to no patience during that time. A couple more years have passed, and my 2017 group exhibit in the city of Newark, New Jersey, inspired me to revisit Spring Valley once more. One evening, I suddenly developed the urge to walk around. My eyes then caught a glimpse of 3 women hanging out in the kids' playing ground. How could I pass up an opportunity like that? I exclaimed under my breath. I eagerly walked up towards them without hesitation to ask for their portraits. Sure. Where are you putting my photos, hun? Asked the woman in the headscarf. She paused. I'm cool with it. Come take my picture and you can use it. I had not realized how monumental that moment was. This time, with some luck, my camera was loaded with film, already dressed for the occasion in black and white. Twice I hit the shutter, one solo and one with the three of them. It was my first image. That helped set the stage for what my monograph and exhibit is today. What is Remnants of an Exodus? It is a tale of a place. It is a timestamp of culture. It is an irony. It is inspired by parts of the Bible, most notably the book of Exodus. It is an experience of nostalgia. It is a movie, a musical to be exact. It is the result of a community in devastation created by criminals conveniently dressed in political suits. It is a reflection of me and others that look like me. It is about hope. The hope that one day more meaningful exchanges could flourish throughout the world. It begs the question, is it the hope that kills? I hope not. As I occasionally tread casually through the old neighborhood, I still see old-time friends and acquaintances. Although a former shell of itself, my heart still finds refuge. Small talks can sometimes revitalize fond memories. I still support the local vegan spot hanging on for dear life, waiting for change that seems to remain out of grasp. No one will save this town but itself. That's my own yellow sticky note agonizingly reminding me. Life is too distracting to mobilize as one and fight the powers that be. So they drink and smoke. So they drink themselves and smoke themselves to near death. In some cases, they drink themselves to death. That's exactly how Dominique left us most recently. Here today, gone tomorrow. Luckily, these remnants still have the opportunity to move forward. But it takes guts to step away and admit where things went wrong. It takes guts to look within. It takes guts to mobilize. It takes guts.
Where are the laundry?
What's that?
Where?
It takes guts to learn from our own mistakes. It takes guts to stand up when we get knocked down. It takes guts to ask for help. And it takes guts to unlearn the lies that have been fed to us for so long. Why waste my time pursuing a lost cause? Through my convictions, I'll find strength. I'll find strength, discipline, and renewal of hope. I'm the father of 2 kids. Yet there's enough room in me to listen to the cries echoing through the valleys flowing with adversity and scorn. How can I walk away knowing that change isn't certain, but the pursuit of change is yet another step forward in the battle for equity? Now is not the time to shove our tails in between our legs. Perhaps one drop can help redirect the river elsewhere. After all, this is nothing new. We've seen this played out a million times inside thousands and thousands of communities worldwide. The elements of The elements I once knew of the town have now become a myth. Indeed, a lost cause, but her story will continue to be told even after my last breath. That I promise. Okay. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Al, especially just for sharing such a personal narrative of your approach to the work. Well, I'd like to open it up to questions to the attendees that are present. You can pop the questions into the chat. And I will read them out loud.
Read them out loud.
Well, I guess as people are thinking of questions, one that I was thinking about, and we were chatting earlier, Al, about your approach with your portraits in particular, and I was curious with if you knew a lot of the people already, or if they were like the three women you photographed, if they were just, you know, kind of happenstance folks that you came upon.
Yeah, most of those people I've never met before, including those three women. But for me, I'm a people person, and you know, just walking through the park or walking on the streets, I could just easily like strike up a conversation. I've learned that through my childhood years, and I say childhood as in when I grew up in Jamaica, and at age 6, 7, 8, till 16 when I moved away. My grandmother is my hero, my heroine, and my everything, and I learned a lot of that from her. So within my images, it's just easy for me to. This is how I established a relationship, a temporary relationship with that with the sitter, by just walking by and just like getting, you know, it's always like an energy thing actually. You know, you see someone and you could just easily know if that person has like good energy or not. And for this particular project, like I needed that, you know. But after photographing a lot of these folks, I was able to establish permanent relationships with them. You know, I don't just do it. I just go into the community just for show, as you know. And I'm not knocking anyone else, but I feel like that's kind of like how you keep that those topics going, by continuing to forge new relationships within the community that you've photographed, you know.
Thank you for answering my question. It's great. So we do have some questions in the chat. Anastasia Campos asks, how many participants got to see their photos printed in the book? What was their response?
Yeah, that's a good question. I sometimes go into Spring Valley. I drive through Spring Valley, and you know, going through the park or on Main Street, or you know, going to the barbershop, and I see some folks that I've photographed, and I'm like, hey, listen, you know, I got something for you. And I would go in the car and, you know, grab that book and sign it for them and hand it to them. And, you know, they're so appreciative about it, right? So I would probably say maybe about half the participants maybe a little bit more. And it's only because, like, you know, it's very difficult to, I think a few of them have, you know, they've moved away, and it's very difficult to get a hold of them. But you know, every now and then I'll see someone that knows that other person. I was like, listen, I haven't seen this person in a while. You know, can you get this book to them? You know, this is a two-part question, right?
Yeah. I guess how many participants got to see the photos? And then the second question was, what was their response?
Yeah. The response, you know, they loved it. You know, I could easily, you know, I'll go through the community anywhere there, and usually someone knows me. And you know, it's not something that I sought for myself, but there's a, you know, it's kind of like, they look up to me, you know, and you know, for me, it's kind of uncomfortable, you know, because I like to bond on equal measures, but it's just that it's the nature, you know, you kind of have the power of the camera, and you being able to control the narrative in whatever way you like. And because I was able to control that narrative and make them look more empowered as well, not only in a depressed state, but an empowered state, like that made a huge difference. And you know, that's probably one of my greatest accomplishments, really, as far as this project goes, is just being able to see their reaction, you know, and I don't anticipate their reaction in any way. It just happens.
Thank you, Al.
Mm-hmm.
Molly Major asks, why was there hostility from the Jewish community when you were photographing? I think Molly, was that in response to the photograph from your early, I think, is that what? Yeah.
Yes, I think so. It's a very closed, they're a very closed group of people, and I understand, you know, they don't welcome outsiders, but that night they felt like everyone was attacking them, which wasn't the case. It's just the arguments, you know, you're in a group of people. There's so many different people in one house, and these things can get contested. And that's what happened. And you know, I haven't seen any. I mean, there have been bad reactions, but I haven't heard anything anti-Semitic there while I was shooting. And but it's just the fact that these town halls could get pretty heated, and it's been a real mess. So they don't like cameras, and you know, and I get that, I understand that. But you know, you have a group of photographers documenting in a setting that it's all game, because you're now on government property, and or public, whatever, and photographers also have the right to document, like, you know, these meetings. And so that's what I did, and that's what other photographers and videographers did at the time. Did I answer that question?
I think so. Molly Major, you can best answer that, since it was. Feel free to write response in the chat too. And And then Molly Newgard just added a question. Do you feel as if this project has given you closure or opened up more questions about the impact of Exodus and change?
That's a very good question, and it's a question that I kind of feel like I need to bat that somewhere, but that's a good question. I don't know if I can answer that question actually. It's closure. There is some closure in the fact that I can you know, I had let everything out, you know. I let my life, I put my entire life on display. I don't know of another photographer that's done that. Maybe one of you guys who you know, you historians, photo historians, could send me some info on another photographer who's done that, like putting their lives out there. But for me, it's been personal for a long time, and so in that respect, yeah, there is closure in that respect. In other respects, there can never be full closure because I just cannot understand why you have a bunch of family members who keep on fighting, and there's absolutely no solution to it, and it's going to get worse. You know, there's no coming together. My dream is to have everyone you know, have everyone live kumbaya. That's my dream. You know. So full closure, not really. Glass half full, maybe. So yeah.
Now that your monograph's been published, do you think you'll go back and rephotograph in Spring Valley, or are you kind of focused more on new projects or new ideas?
Yeah, you know, I just posted like something that I that I photographed last year through the pandemic, because I had parked remnants of an Exodus during the pandemic until like last year, or during the height of the pandemic, until throughout until down a little bit further down the line. I'm always photographing different projects. I don't know. I have 4 or 5 different projects that I'm photographing right now, and they all have the potential to being a photo book. One of my most well, for me, I'd say for now I needed to get this out of my you know, off my chest, and then I'm gonna move more into like more nature stuff, because that's where my head is at right now. But I'm always connected to Spring Valley somehow. You know, if I move away, and or when I move away, I'm gonna be back, and I'm going to be visiting the park to see who's out there. You know, but my other projects, I mean, that, and then I have a very ambitious project on my kids, which that's not going to be released anytime soon, like maybe within another 8 years. But it's a, you know, it's a huge project, and I'm really excited into sharing some of those images actually, because that's a really that I'm very excited about that for sure.
That's awesome. It's nice to hear that, yeah, you're thinking in like lots of different sort of directions as an artist. I think that's inspirational to a lot of us artists ourselves. Kristen Joy Emack just added a comment, which is really sweet. She says, not a question, but I'm so struck by how reverent, quiet, and spiritually elegant your images are. And it was great to see the early images that ended up feeding remnant of an Exodus. That's nice to hear.
Thank you, Kristen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's you know, one of those things. I get I get a decent amount of photographers like, come to me and, they always ask me like, what do how do you do it? Because they'd like to release photo books themselves. And I just tell them straight up, like, you gotta be honest with yourself. That's the first person you need to be honest with. Being honest with yourself and try different things, be as creative as possible as well, but be honest with yourself. Just don't do it because you're going to garner a lot of attention. I rather look at something that is very delicate and striking to me than something that is, it might have like 20,000 hits, but it's like, it's super popular. It's like the main thing to do, and I'm always like pushing against things. I always enjoy being pushing up against the status quo, and if it works, it works. Rewriting the way I do things or the way people do things, but I'm just going to continue to do what I do, which is being honest with myself and see where that gets me.
Yeah, that's really beautiful advice, especially for just working artists. Craig Hickman asks, can you say something about your process for editing and sequencing the pictures in your book?
I'm sorry?
Can you say something about your process for editing and sequencing the pictures in your book?
Yeah, that's a good question. Editing and sequencing. Editing and sequencing, if ever there was I'd say if ever, there is a weakness for me, at least. It's actually sequencing. But I enjoy it as well. And but it wouldn't have been the success it is without the help of Jason and Shane, who are both extremely instrumental in getting this book in the direction it needed to get into. I have this direction, like like you can see this photo, this image right here. Naturally, I'm a graphic designer. That's that's my educational background, and I felt like I needed to insert some of those things, and this is kind of like how I think. Redrawing the lines of society, both visually and so Jason and Shane and Jason, mainly Shane, actually. He's a very wonderful person, and he's been he's a tough person. Very fun, but he's very tough as well. He knows his stuff, he knows his thing. So I'll get pushed back from him on certain images that I do. And when I'm gonna go through this, and you're going to see the last image here. This is not a part of the book. It's one of my favorite images of the entire project. But there's a certain weight on his shoulder that I wanted to showcase. And, you know, every time I look in his eyes, I mean, there's something about it, you know, it could say a lot of different things. But you know, I try to get into, but you know, for me, I'm a huge team player, and I thought this book is a success because of how all us three were able to create that you know, create that workflow, that good workflow, you know, send it back, you know, come back, you know. And by the way, it's an extremely funny way of doing, of you know, putting a book together, because at the time I had not met Jason and Shane, so we've been doing everything digitally for such a long time. But it's weird how that works, you know. Shane, I have not met. I still have not met him in person. I was supposed to. He was in New York a couple years ago at a show, and something came up with me, so I was unable to attend. But Jason, you know, hung around like a couple of times after the book was printed.
So sort of a follow-up question by J.C. Elliott. What drew you to the subjects you chose? Were you mainly interested in portraits, or did you also want to document physical aspects of the community?
Yeah, it was mainly portraits, but yeah, some, you know, because I'm from the traditional documentary world as well. So, but you know, I kind of wanted to mix it up, you know. I did that with animals, you know. So for me, it was always not really limiting myself to one you know, aspect of photographing this you know, for this book.
And Jeffrey Baxter asks, sort of, it's a bit of a long question, but I'll read the whole thing. Mayor Thompson served 2 terms as mayor of Spring Valley. He tried to serve a 3rd term, but the new mayoral candidate Darden beat him. However, Mayor Thompson served 2 terms, but he left Spring Valley with a surplus. Unfortunately, under Darden, the surplus was smaller and smaller than the successor mayors Jasmine DeMeza and current Mayor Seymour drove Spring Valley into a deficit. Do you think at some point in the future, Spring Valley would slowly climb itself out of the big hole it's in, or do you think the unfortunate takeover we are currently seeing will continue on for more than quite some time?
Yeah, it's, I don't really like speculating, but I'll do it anyway. Mayor Darden did his thing here, and you know, accepted some money, and is what a lot of those politicians do, and he left the town in a huge mess. I can't foresee how there's going to be a turnaround in Spring Valley, honestly. If there's going to be a turnaround, it has to be like really bad. And I mean, it's really bad right now, but it has to be really, really, really bad. And it's not only limited to Spring Valley. There are towns surrounding Spring Valley. So the entire Rockland County is being affected by not necessarily gentrification, but the housing market. The housing market right is a huge boom, and there's always real estate developers coming in. So it's not necessarily a buyer's market because the homes are still is pretty high right now, and everyone is like moving up from the city because of the pandemic. So in terms of like the housing market, you're gonna have higher taxes, higher rents. All that stuff is gonna get trickled down.
Here.
Hello. Mute yourself. It's gonna get trickled down to renters. Renters are the people who are suffering right now. Homeowners, in a sense that they're paying more taxes too. But if you go further upstate, there's a lot of problems being that are happening up there right now too. And I don't. So I said before, like I don't foresee. I think New York is going to be a huge mess. Like in 20 years, it's going to be a huge mess. And I'm so sorry in saying that, but that's the trajectory.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Jeffrey, for the
Mhm.
question. And a final question in the chat is from Susan Fink. There is a tension between strength and quietude in your images, which I really admire. I see it in both your portrait work and your landscapes. Could you possibly reflect on this aspect of your artistic vision?
You say strength and what?
Strength and quietude.
Okay, yeah. Yeah. I think they're, for me, I think the foundation of the universe is about balance, like yin and yang, right? You need to have both. And that's a part of like the way I do storytelling as well. I enjoy leaving like a little bit of room for imagination. And yeah, that's the way I do it, like in terms of balance. The project is like a movie. I thought about that. This is like I had to prepare myself over time. Let's see. During in 2018, I started watching a lot of movies. I read one particular book. I can't remember the name now. It was about gentrification in Boston, and that was recommended to me by a fellow artist, and just to see how they did things, and but there's a lot of dialogues that I a lot of dialogues that I was able to carry over onto adapt into the to the book itself. But again, I'm old school with it. Like I love leaving that that open and version to things.
Thanks, Al. And thanks
Mhm.
for the question. We're kind of near the end of time, but does anyone have any final questions for Al or comments? You can raise your hand or pop them in the chat real quick.
Raise your hand like you just don't care.
But if not, yeah, we definitely encourage folks to come down to the gallery to see Al's show. This is Al's first solo exhibition, I believe. Is that correct? Technically?
First
or-
solo.
Yeah.
First solo. In fact, I used to paint before I got into photography. I used to paint, a lot of acrylic painting and drawing and things like that. And I really wanted to be a painter. But and one of my things was like I wanted to get a show. I wanted to get a show. And it's just so ironic that that it happened, you know, with me being a photographer, an artist, but still, you know, photography. I thought that was pretty ironic.
Well, it's a gorgeous show. And you also are, after this, I think we're sending the work elsewhere. Does that
Mhm.
remind me where that's going?
Yeah, that's going to be, I have work with a gallery here in Rockland County, Roca. That's Rockland Center, Roca Rockland Center of the Arts, and that should be very very good as well. I got invited recently, actually, so I'm very excited about that, and I'm definitely going to be there in person. I wish I was there in person with you, obviously, but at least my work is there, and I'm, you know, there in spirit.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Al, for your time tonight and your beautiful narrative. I really enjoyed what you
Thank
wrote
you.
and what you spoke to. And thank you so much for answering folks' questions. We are excited to see where you go from here. And yeah, thanks
Too bad.
everybody.
Thank you, Al.
You're welcome. Thank you. And thank you for having me. And thanks to everyone out there that listened to me, you know, my little emotional essay.
Great, really beautiful.
And the
We
book
should
is
have-
also on sale at Blue Sky too, as C mentioned. So come get the book.
Yep, we have copies here, and there's, as Al was mentioning, Shane has a really beautiful essay in the back as well, that I highly recommend, just to get the book, to look at the work and to read Shane's essay as well. And
Yeah, great.
the book's
Big up.
published through Nomic Book. So check out Nomic. You can purchase books online through them as well if you're not local here. But if you are, yeah, come on down, check out the book, come say hi to us too. We're here open Wednesday through Saturday. So we'd love to see you. And thanks so much.
Thank you, guys.
Have a wonderful rest of your week to everybody.
Thank you all.
Love y'all.
Take care.
Bye.
Peace.